Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to those who joined, the students of the Haidh Masterclass. Last week was the first part of the Haidh Masterclass, um, in which we discussed the definitions of Haidh, the literal meaning, flow, the legal meaning, blood that flows uh, from the womb and exits the inner lips of the labia minora. Um, uh, this includes literal blood and legal blood within the days of Haidh and within the days of menstruation. Then we looked at valid bloods. Valid bloods are used to establish the Haidh habit. And then we discussed invalid bloods. Valid bloods is spotting or flowing of 3 days or more, or 10 days or less. Invalid bloods is basically bloods that's less than 3 days or more than 10 days. Then we looked at the definition of Nifaas, the literal meaning childbirth, the legal meaning blood that flows from the womb and exits the inner lips, labia minora of the farj, the vagina. And in Nifaas, if there's literal spotting, it's counted within the days of Nifaas, and in the case of legal blood, that is also counted within the days of Nifaas. Then we looked at valid bloods for Nifaas. If a woman spots anywhere up to 40 days, it will be counted as valid bloods and it would be used to establish a habit. There we discussed that there is no minimum period for Nifaas, there's only a maximum period of Nifaas. So bloods besides Haidh, in other words, less than 3, more than 10, or bloods over 40, in the case of Nifaas, will be counted as Istihaadhah. The definition of Istihaadhah is bloods that flow due to a ruptured vein and not from the womb. So if you look at the two definitions, one is Haidh, one is Nifaas, they both have something in common. One is it must it must flow from the womb, and it must exit the inner lips, labia minora. The difference between the definition of Haidh and Nifaas is, obviously, you've got a child in the case of Nifaas, and that blood of Nifaas will be counted when most of the child exits the womb. Prior to that, it will not be counted as Nifaas. That's the major difference between the definition of Haidh and Nifaas. Bloods other than that will be counted as Istihaadhah. Then we looked at the 3 types of woman. One is a beginner woman. What is her habit? It says that if she has a continuous flow of blood, she has a predetermined habit of 10 days Haidh and the rest 20 days tuhur. Then we discuss the definition of a habitual woman, a woman who has a valid habit or a valid tuhur or experiences both of them once, or one of them at least. So she has experienced a valid blood once, will count her as a habitual woman, or she experienced a valid blood and a valid tuhur, will count her as a habitual woman. The other type of woman we discussed was the confused woman, a lost woman, a woman who has no idea of her bloods, her habits, the number of days, etc. She has no idea whatsoever. So the 2 types of people we'll be discussing mainly, the beginner woman and the habitual woman. We won't be delving too much into the confused woman or the lost woman, a woman who doesn't know her habits. Okay, now we discuss colors of bloods. So some women believe that a certain color, for instance, red is counted and all other colors are not counted. They differentiate between the colors of blood. Now, all colors of blood, including black, red, yellow, brown, muddy colors, all are counted as bloods of Haidh and Nifaas during their periods. So if it is your days of Haidh, if it is your days of Nifaas, you cannot state and say, I usually experience red. This month I am experiencing yellow, therefore it's not Haidh. There is no such thing. It all colors will be counted as Haidh during their days, and all colors will be counted as Nifaas during their days. Now, there is a difference of opinion. Imam Abu Yusuf, one of Imam Abu Hanifa's famous students, he holds the view that brown. Could you hear the whole time, or was it? Okay. I think the mic was muted. Now it's open. I'll just repeat what I discussed. So, in regards to colors of blood, there is no difference in regards to colors of blood during the days of Haidh and during the days of Nifaas. Um, all colors will be counted as Haidh during their days, and all colors will be counted as Nifaas during their days. Imam Abu Yusuf, rahimahullah, one of Imam Abu Hanifa's famous students, he holds the view that brown colors of bloods are not counted at the start of a Haidh period, but it is counted at its end. Now, one of the reasons given is that usually a woman experiences brown before she experiences red. So, he says, you know what, it's not actually counted, it's just the start of an oncoming Haidh. So he says, no, brown colors are not counted at the start. When it turns red, etc., or other colors, it will be counted. Similarly, he says that at its end, it's also not counted because now it's coming towards the end, and therefore it's not counted. So brown at the start is not counted, and brown at the end is actually counted. So this is his view. Other scholars hold the view that green colors of bloods are not counted at the start of a Haidh period, but it is counted at its end. So you see these two different views regarding brown and green. This is mentioned in the text of the Fuqaha, where they explain these differences. Now, what is the valid view? What is the authentic view? The authentic view is that all colors of bloods are counted as Haidh, and this would include Nifaas as well, with the exception of white colors of blood. With the exception of white colors of blood. So everything is counted except white. However, a mufti is at liberty to issue a fatwa to make an exception on either of these views in the case of need and necessity. So, a woman may be in Umrah, a woman may be in Hajj, and she may be experiencing a spotting, let's say, on the day she is performing Tawaf Ziyarah. This is farz, and without it, the Hajj would be invalid. So, let's say on that day of Tawaf Ziyarah that she is performing or intending to perform, she spots one of the colors where some of the fuqaha do not count it as Haidh or even Nifaas. And now she experiences spotting for, let's say, 5 days later from the start, or 10 days later from the start. So retrospectively, the alim, the mufti, will give a ruling to say that, listen, you started spotting on that day, therefore that tawaf ziyarah is invalid, therefore your hajj is invalid and your hajj must be repeated. Now, to avoid that type of situation, an alim, a mufti, will apply his mind, will refer to the books of fiqh, and try to find some relaxation for a woman to avoid invalidating her hajj. So yes, in those cases, it's left up to the mufti to decide and give a view to not invalidate a woman's hajj. So that is why we have these views there for ulama and muftis to decide upon. Nonetheless, the general rule is that all colors of blood are counted except white colors of blood. So when do you consider the colors of blood. You actually consider it when it is moist and not after it dries. So, for instance, a woman may spot, and when it is moist, it may be red. But then, if she checks it, let's say a few hours later, or maybe a day later, etc., the color changes from red to, let's say, brown or some other color. So, which color do you consider? You will consider the color when it was moist, not when it dried. So, for instance, it could be red at the start and then it turned white for whatever reason. So you won't say, okay, listen, it's not counted as haze. You will still count it, or count the start of it from the time it was moist, not after it dried. Okay, there's a question here. If a woman had a habit of 7 days and then she started bleeding continuously for months, um, so will it be that 7 days haze and 15 days tuhar, or we say 10 days of maximum of haze and 15 days tuhar? Okay, so further discussion on this subject comes later. I'll answer the question. So if a woman has a habit of 7 days and then she has continuous flow of blood. Now, obviously, what is valid blood? 7 days. What is invalid blood? The blood that comes after 10 days. So now, when you got such a situation, you cannot use invalid bloods to establish a habit. You will follow the valid bloods and follow that habit. So we'll say that her habit is 7 days, and the blood that came after is actually not haze, is actually istihaadhah, right? In terms of tuhar, this discussion comes later as well. When it exceeds a certain period, then she will have a predetermined habit similar to a predetermined situation of a beginner woman, a mu'tada. But because she is a mubtadi'ah, it won't be a predetermined habit of 20 days. It will be a predetermined habit of 15 days. So, in summary, 7 days will be her habit and 15 days would be her habit. So 7 days haze habit, 15 days to her habit. Lady asked a question. Just to clarify, I generally start with brown, so it will be considered haze according to the majority. Yes. So even in this case, you will count the spotting from the brown spotting. You won't wait to see another color spotting. So that is the authentic view that is followed. If a girl sees a brown spot a week before her actual haze, nothing after, can she ignore that brown spot as she had a full red period after? Now, the start and ends or early bloods, etc., those discussions come later. But just assume this is a normal situation, and there's no other, concerns or other laws that we are considering. She spots early, and then she spots brown. Um, and then later she spots red. So let's say on the 31st of the month, she saw brown. And then on the 1st of the next month, she saw red. 1 day later, where do you count the blood from, or where do you actually consider the blood from? You will consider it from the 31st and not the 1st. Why? Because all colors of blood are counted as haze, with the exception of white colors of blood. Okay. Now, at times, a woman prevents the appearance of blood, or the blood does not actually appear. So, if the blood is felt internally, or it is stopped with a cloth, padding, or stuffing before actually appearing, right? So, it didn't actually appear. You used something to prevent it from appearing. So no laws will apply. In other words, the wudu will not break, number one. Number two, the start of haze and nifas cannot be established. Why? Because the blood didn't actually appear. If we look at our definition of haze and nifas, is that the blood must exit the farj, the labia minora, for it to actually be counted. So if it stopped, right, wudu doesn't break. obviously ghusl doesn't apply, and hayd and nifas cannot be established because it stopped. If it is stopped after actually appearing, the rulings related to hayd and nifas still apply. So, for instance, it's the days of a woman's spotting, hayd days, or let's say during the nifas period, she spotted already. So let's say she spotted on the first of the month, she had a spotting, and then she decided, you know what, let me use something to stop it. And then, you know what, I'll carry on with my salahs, I'll carry on with my fast, etc. It doesn't apply. Once it's spotted already, it's counted from that time onwards, regardless of you putting something there to stop the flow coming on the second day or the third day, etc. So, in other words, you'll count it from the first spotting. You won't say, okay, let's count it after I remove it. You'll count it from the first spotting. In the case of istihaadhah, if the blood is stopped after actually appearing, the rulings related to it will terminate. There's one exception to the rule. In the case of istihaadhah, let's say it's outside the days of hayd, outside the days of nifas, and she decides to do that to perform salah. Then in that case, we'll say no problem, you carry on with your salah. But when it comes to hayd and nifas, you will count it from the first spotting, even if you've put something there to stop it for a few days. Okay. If a woman has a yellow discharge between her hays regularly, what happens when she needs to determine the end of her hays when she sees a yellow discharge or spotting? So, similar to the above, she spots yellow between her hays. Let's say on day 5, she spots regularly. And now she wants to find out when does the haze actually end. So again, regardless of what you spotted or what color you spotted at the start, at the middle, or at the end, it is all counted as one period, and you will count everything as haze within the days of haze. So that's the authentic view to follow. The other colors come into play as an exception to the rule. In normal circumstances, you will follow the rule that all bloods are counted as haze with the exception of white colors of blood. Okay, then we look at the pad, the kursuf, right? Because we are talking about stopping the bloods. So the literal meaning of kursuf in Arabic is cotton. What is the shari meaning? The legal meaning of the fuqaha, what they refer to as a kursuf, it refers to that which is placed at the mouth of the vagina. So pay attention to this definition. It refers to that which is placed at the mouth of the vagina, not inside the vagina. It is makruh and disliked to put anything inside the farj. Why? We look at it at the bottom there, because it resembles masturbation, and anything that resembles that must be avoided. So that is why it is disliked and makruh to use something that goes inside the farj, and this would include a tampon. This would include the usage of a tampon. So the fuqaha explain it is preferable for a virgin girl to use a pad at the time of haze only, whereas it is preferable for a non-virgin woman to use a pad at the time of haze and tuhar. So for a virgin girl, as a precaution, of course, she needs to keep herself pure and not mess her clothes, etc. So she'll use it at the time of haze. And when it comes to a non-virgin woman, she'll use it at both times. In other words, when it comes to a virgin girl, we try as far as possible not to put anything or use anything, just as a matter of precaution. But remember, this is only a matter of preference. It's not a matter of permissibility or impermissibility. So it's disliked, makruh, for a woman to place it inside the farj as it resembles masturbation. The other question says that the yellow discharge occurs regularly during her tuhar period. So even if you spot the same colors in your haze or in your tuhar, it makes no difference. Remember, it is not about the colors. of course, with the exception of white, it is about the days in which you are experiencing it. So colors, if you think about it, is actually secondary. It's not a primary thing. Some women take it to an extreme, and we've had cases where now the woman in the house or the girl in the house is confused because the mother is saying, you know what, you spotted this color. The daughter is saying, no, I spotted that color, and this is actually counted as haze, and that's actually not counted as haze. That is now takalluf and going to an extreme. There's no need to go to that extent. Everything is counted as haze with the exception of white. Right. If it is placed at the outer lips of the vagina and it is moist, haze will be established or the wudu will break in the case of istihaadhah. So now when it appears and it appears on that pad, everything starts from there. The wudu will break, obviously, and retrospectively you'll count the haze from the time it appeared on the pad. If it is placed inside the orifice of the vagina and it is moist, no rules will be established until it appears at the inner lips of the vagina or until it is removed. So, for instance, if it was inserted, then even if it was moist, nothing will be established. Why? Because it did not appear at the inner lips of the farj. So, it must appear. The question, if a woman in tawaf uses a tampon to stop discharge, so she can make tawaf and she is married, is this allowed? Right. So look, when we say makruh, that applies to normal circumstances. An exceptional case of tawaf, if a woman doesn't do it, it won't be possible for her to do tawaf. So that would be an exception to the rule. Remember, the rule of karahiyat is applicable to normal circumstances. Here, there's an exceptional circumstance. If she doesn't do it, she cannot do the tawaf, etc. So she would be permitted in that case. So the question is, why is it preferred for a non-virgin to wear a pad in tuhar? So haze and tuhar, in other words, it is preferable for a woman in that state to have it on all the time. Why? Because there is nothing to secure, there is nothing to protect. But for a virgin girl, she shouldn't be putting there anything. She shouldn't be putting anything there at all, except where it is absolutely necessary. And what's absolutely necessary for her? It is to track her haze. So that is why it is preferred for her only in that state. Okay, there's a lengthy question there. Let's try and keep the questions straightforward and simple so we can answer it. Yeah, if it's a bit lengthy in terms of doing the calculations, then that will take lots of time. Other question is, it's for married woman to keep her clothes clean after marital relationship. Look, a woman that engage in some form of relationship with a husband, it's not necessary that the clothes be clean. Of course, once that happens, she must perform ghusl and come out of that state. Right. So another question, does haze begin if one sees a streak of blood only when wiping? It happens a few days before actual bleeding takes place. So look, the thing is, the blood must appear for it to be counted. Now, again, some women go to extremes. If it is there, but it hasn't appeared, there is no need for you now to go there and sort of make it appear by wiping it out. There's no need for that at all. You wait for it to naturally appear. When it does that, then you'll count it from that point onwards. But if you have done that, and if you've used a pad or a tissue, whatever the case is, and you've wiped it and made it exit and made it appear, then you'll have to count it from that point onwards. But if you didn't do that and it still hasn't appeared at the inner lips, it won't be counted. Okay. Now, the reason we need to look at this slide is and understand the difference between Haidh, Nifaas, and other bloods. So, one is the bloods that appear at the time of Haidh and Nifaas, and one is bloods that come out from your wound on your hand, your arm, etc. There's a slight difference between the definitions. So, in regards to Haidh and Nifaas, it must simply appear. In other words, it's not necessary for it to flow, right? That is why we're looking at this slide. So let's say you've got a wound and there's some blood that's flowing. Imam Abu Yusuf says that your wudu doesn't break unless the flow of blood takes place. In other words, you got pricked with a pin and the blood simply appeared. Um, Imam Abu Yusuf says your wudu is not broken as yet until it flows. Imam Muhammad says the flow of blood is not necessary if it appears bigger than the wound. So he says even if it didn't flow but it appeared bigger than the wound, it's a big bulge on the top. So he says your wudu has broken even if it didn't flow, right? So fatwa, both views are preferred. However, Imam Abu Yusuf rahimahullah's view is more superior. His view is followed when it comes to normal circumstances. The flow of blood is necessary. So what's the difference between Haidh and Nifaas? There it must simply appear and it's counted. When it comes to the blood of a wound, it's actually counted only when it flows, according to Imam Abu Yusuf. Okay. Now, on the same subject, if you look at blood exiting from other than the front and back passages, the blood must exit its passages and not simply appear at its edges, and the blood must flow. So, slight difference again between the definition of Haidh and Nifaas. Here, it must actually exit the passage. So, if you look at Haidh and Nifaas, we said that it must exit the farj. But when you say exit the farj, it actually means it appears at the inner lips of the farj. So yes, it must exit, but by simply appearing, it will be counted from that point onwards. When it comes to other parts of your body, there it must actually exit and not simply appear. Obviously, in that case, it must flow as well. So here's a question again. If a woman bleeds from Istihaadhah, does she have to change her pad and make fresh wudu for each time she reads Salah or the Quran? Now, look, similar to other bloods, the blood that a woman spots, etc., if it is now bigger than that 5 rand coin, etc., then obviously it's not permitted for her to perform Salah. If it is less than that amount, etc., it is preferable for her to change it before continuing with Salah. Now, in the case of Istihaadhah, if a woman experiences spotting or flow of blood, the her wudu will break if it is not a continuous state. It is not a continuous state. In other words, the spotting is, let's say she spots at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then she spots at 5 o'clock later on. In between, when it comes to, let's say, Zohar or Asr, she will have to make a fresh wudu and perform the salah. During the Tuhar days, a girl spots, but it's not continuous. Example, spotting during at Fajr, then later at Isha, then 2 days later. Does one need to make wudu for every salah until the spotting stops, or only for the salah that you see the blood? So when it comes to the time of salah, you have to see now, are you a woman in the state of istihada, maybe an excused woman, a ma'zura, or she may not be an excused woman. So it doesn't necessarily mean that a woman in istihada is automatically defined as a ma'zura or an excused woman. That will only apply when it is continuous and it is not possible for her to at least find the time to perform wudu and salah without that blood actually stopping. So, in this example, she'll make wudu and she'll have to perform the salah. So does at its edges refer to within the farj? It hasn't exited that area. So firstly, it must appear, right, at the inner lips of the labia, right? Technically speaking, it is not, it hasn't fully exited, but it has exited the farj, right? So it's simply an appearance of it, not a full exit. The slides will be available in the video format. It will be uploaded to YouTube and everyone can view it there. Okay, the sister has requested, let's keep the questions restricted to the slides so we can move quicker through the slides. Okay, on the topic of miscarriage, in the last session, there was a question regarding to miscarriage. This is the slide for it. So a child that miscarries from the womb of the mother in a deceased state, whilst it has discernible features like hands, feet, fingers, nails, and hair. This is counted as a miscarriage which will affect Nifaas, etc. Now, in the case of a miscarriage, if there are discernible features, the blood that flows will be Nifaas. The blood that flows will be Nifaas. Therefore, the blood that flowed prior to the miscarriage will be Istihaadhah. So let's say a woman has fallen pregnant. It is, let's say, 12 weeks, let's say 20 weeks, etc. And during those 12 or 20 weeks, she spotted, right? So now, if she is spotted during those days, we know that the blood of a woman that is pregnant, while she experiences the blood in that state, it will be counted as Istihaadhah. It will be counted as Istihaadhah. Now, when the child is, when there's a miscarriage at 12 weeks, etc., and there's discernible features, the blood that flows thereafter would be Nifaas. However, if there are no discernible features, the blood that flows will be Haidh if there is a minimum of 3 days spotting that was followed by a complete tuhar tam. Okay, so we've got a situation where there's no discernible features. So now the question arises, we said that any spotting during pregnancy is Istihaadhah. It doesn't really have much of rulings attached to it. So now, when there's no discernible features, what do you count that blood as? So we count that blood as Haidh if, number one, first condition, minimum of 3. We know it has to be a minimum of 3 for it to be counted as Haidh, etc. And added to that, there must have been a tuhar of 15 days before the last Haidh. So let's assume that happened. Now we'll say, okay, the bloods, we need to go back and look at the record. 3 days spotted, fine. 5 days spotted, fine. That is actually counted as Haidh. Everything thereafter is counted as Istihaadhah. She has to now do the calculation accordingly. There's no Nifaas that will apply. However, if there wasn't a minimum of 3 days spotting or it was not followed by a complete tuhar, the blood that flows will be Istihaadhah. The blood that flows will be Istihaadhah. Okay, then we look at dry birth. Right? Dry birth is basically a woman gave birth and there was no blood flow. This is a unique scenario that's discussed in the books of fiqh. Imam Abu Hanifa says if that has happened, she must make ghusl after birth. Fatwa is given on this view. Obviously, this is a precaution. We said that in terms of Nifaas and its definitions, there must be blood coming from the womb, exiting the farj, in the lips of the labia minora, and there must be the child must have exited at least 50%, 51% or more. So here it says, even though there's no blood, as a precaution, she must still make ghusl after that period of time. Imam Abu Yusuf says that she is clean, she does not have to make ghusl. Why? Because there was no blood that actually appeared, no blood that actually exited after the child was born. Remember, this is not a common situation, this is a unique scenario. In regards to twin births, Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Abu Yusuf say that Nifaas is counted from the first childbirth within a 6-month period. This is the authentic view. We discussed this in the previous lesson. So the view that we discussed was Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Abu Yusuf's view. The other view, Imam Muhammad says that Nifaas is counted from the last childbirth. From the last childbirth. Again, this is now for ulama muftis to decide depending on the circumstance in the case of need and necessity to give fatwa on perhaps Imam Muhammad's view. So let's look at the examples of these two views. Number one, a habitual woman has a 20-day Nifaas habit, right? So she gave birth, the last time she gave birth, the Nifaas was 20 days. She gives birth to the first one and has a 20-day Nifaas, right? Then she gives birth to the second one and has a 21-day Nifaas. So let's look at the chart to understand this example. So day 1 day, she gave birth, right? You see the stars, that's the 20 days habit. She spotted all those days, right? And then she gave birth again on to the second twin on the 21st. And then she spotted all the way through, bringing her to day 41. Right? Now, we have got to keep those two views in mind. Imam Abu Hanifa's view and Imam Abu Yusuf's view. The first 20 days is Nifaas, and the second 21 days is Istihaadhah, according to Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Abu Yusuf. So she reverts to her last Nifaas habit of 20 days as she exceeded the 40-day Nifaas period. So they say that you count it from the first, and any bloods that occur in that period is actually counted as one blood. It's not counted as two blood. So according to them, it's only the first 20 days. The other 21 days that come later will say that, listen, that is Istihaadhah because the bloods are counted from the first child, not from the second child. Imam Muhammad says that the first 20 days is Istihaadhah and the second 21 days is Nifaas, as Nifaas is counted from the birth of the last one. So if you look at his view, it goes the other way around. He doesn't count it from the start, he counts it from the end. So the first spotting and the first bloods from the first one will be counted as Istihaadhah. The second bloods will be counted as Nifaas according to him. But again, the authentic view is on Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Abu Yusuf's view. If you look at the second example, habitual woman has a 20-day Nifaas habit. She gives birth to the first one and has a 20-day Nifaas. So the previous example was 21 days, this is 20 days. Then she gives birth to the second twin and has a 20-day Nifaas. So actually, previous was 2021, this one is 2020, right? So looking at the chart again, she gave birth on day 1. The stars are there for the habit, and then she gave birth on the 21st day, and then she had spotting right till day 40, not day 41 in this case. What's the result? Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Abu Yusuf say that the first and second spotting after the birth of the first and second twin is Nifaas, as they appeared within a 40-day Nifaas period. So everything occurred within a 40-day Nifaas, so therefore everything is counted as Nifaas according to them. Imam Muhammad says the first spotting after the birth of the first one is Istihaadhah, and the second spotting after the birth of the first one is Nifaas, as Nifaas is counted from the birth of the last one. So the major difference here is the view of Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Abu Yusuf. Imam Muhammad still follows his own view on this, but they say that, listen, when it occurs within a 40-day period, everything will be counted. But when after the second the twin is born and then it exceeds the 40-day period, they don't count that as Nifaas, they count that as Istihaadhah. Question, if so, the woman would have to wait to see if it stops before the 40-day 40, and if it exceeded, then the salah missed or fast will have to be made up. Yes, so this is a very important question. And this question applies to Haidh and it applies to Nifaas. There's one rule that must be kept in mind at all times, that when a woman spots in Haidh, when a woman spots in Nifaas, she may have one view at that point in time, but that view can be changed later on or retrospectively. So she could spot on day 1 today, and it's not confirmed that it is Haidh. It will only be confirmed 2 days later or a few days later within the 10-day period. The same would apply to Nifaas. She spots on day 1 and then she's clean for the entire month, she'll carry on as normal. But then on day 40, etc., when she spots, she'll realize that that entire period in between was counted as legal blood, and she was in the legal state of Nifaas. Therefore, any salahs or any fasts that were kept in that time would be nullified. And of course, there's no qaza of salahs for her. But if it is the case of fasting, then the fast will have to be kept later on. That is why we explained literal blood and legal blood. Once you understand that example, then it's very easy to understand the days that she doesn't spot in between the start and the end of those bloods. Okay, in the case of the iddah of pregnancy, the iddah will expire when the last child of the twins is born. There is no difference of opinion in this regard. So if a woman is given talaq, or if a woman's husband has passed away, she has to obviously observe the iddah period. If she is pregnant when this happened, when does the iddah expire? The standard rule is that the iddah expires when she gives birth. So she could give birth one day after the talaq. She could give birth one day after her husband has passed away. The iddah will end at that point in time. In the case of twins now, there's two kids. Where do you count it from? From the birth of the first child, or you will count it from the birth of the second child. So as it's stated here on the slide, the iddah will expire when the last of the twins is born. There's no difference of opinion here. So it's counted from that time. Another question, will the habit of the first haze after Nifaas be counted from the last haze experienced before pregnancy? Remember, if a woman experiences haze, then she experiences a Nifaas. And of course, now there has to be a tuhar in between, and then she follows the rules of haze thereafter. It doesn't reset. We don't say, okay, you know what, she's experienced Nifaas now, and then the next haze, it's all reset. It doesn't work like that. She still has a valid habit. So we know once you got a habit, it sticks until it changes. So even if a pregnancy occurred, the valid habit of haze still remains. When she experiences a haze again, she'll follow that same valid habit. So if it was 7 days before, she'll follow 7 days after the pregnancy, so on and so forth. Okay, then we discuss salah during labor, right? So a woman is in hospital, she's in labor. The labor could be anywhere from a few hours to 1 day, 2 days, etc., depending on the situation. What does she do in that time for her salah? So it could be 5 salahs that she has to consider. It could be more, it could be 10, 15, etc. So the rule is salah remains obligatory on a woman in labor until most of the child is delivered. So she's in hospital, she can't read Fajr, she can't read Zohar, she can't read Asr, etc. because of her state. Perhaps the doctor has advised her, the Muslim doctor has advised her, listen, you can't move anywhere, you got to be in this position, you can't be doing this, that, and the other, and the blood is continuous. So first thing, she will make wudu and perform salah. But then obviously, practically speaking, if that is not possible, she will make tayammum and perform salah. If she cannot physically perform salah, she will perform salah with indications. So, right? So we know firstly she has to perform salah, right? How does she do it? She does it wudu and performs the salah. If she can't make wudu for whatever reason, she'll make tayammum and perform salah. In regards to the actual performance of the salah, what happens, right? So it's possible that she may be a ma'zura and an excused person, but it doesn't still excuse her from the actual salah. So she may be excused in terms of tahara, where, listen, she'll make that one wudu for that salah time and she'll perform the salah. But how does she perform the salah? With indication. So she'll sit on the bed, right? She may possibly be a ma'zura, an excused person. She'll sit on the bed and perform those salahs. There is no need for her to then repeat the salahs thereafter. So this is the importance Shariat has given, that even in that state, salah is not maaf and forgiven until most of the child has exited, 51% or more of the child has exited. So record, and sometimes it may not be possible at all for her to do that. When that is the case, then she will make a record of it and make qaza of it later on. Question, just to confirm, most cases mums can perform salah, better to move while in labor. Yes, so it may be possible for her in most cases, alhamdulillah, so she can perform it in that state if it's possible. If a woman thought she was finished with her haze, and she had a ghusl and started reading salah and she made tilawah of the Quran, if she spots again the next day and it is within the 10-day time frame, so it is regarded as haze, will she have to repeat the paras that she read? Meaning now, is she if she is doing a khatam. Now, so remember, when you are in a state of haze, you are not mukallaf. In other words, the laws of Sharia do not apply to you, or certain laws of the Sharia do not apply to you. For instance, salah, etc., because of that state. So now it's prohibited for a woman in that state to recite Quran. So just like the performance of salah will not be counted as it is prohibited, similarly the tilawah recited in that state, an impure state, is actually not considered. So whatever you read in that state will have to be repeated. Does salah made with ishara need to be repeated thereafter? No. So if you perform salah with ishara, there is no need to repeat the salah. So you have a person in the masjid performing salah on the chair. He is making ishara and he's performing salah with indication. There is no need for him to repeat the salah because that is what he is able to do at that point in time. So there is no need to repeat the salah later on. If internal examinations are done, does the laboring need to make ghusl? So if an internal examination is conducted, it's possible wudu will break, but not ghusl. Ghusl will not apply to her at that point in time. And most likely, if all these things are happening, she will possibly be a ma'zura, an excused person, but no ghusl. The ghusl comes into play after birth, not before that. With regards to habit being reset, when will the habit be reset? If a woman goes for surgery to remove cysts, for example, will this reset her habit? According to the gynae, the cycle changed when the surgery was performed. Okay, so you have to understand one thing. One is the medical view of menstrual cycle, and one is the Shari'i view of menstrual cycles. There is a different understanding regarding the two of them, but our laws are derived from the Sharia, from Quran, Hadith, and the legislation of the Sharia. So if a cyst is removed, they may tell you, you know what, dysfunctional bleeding, etc., is not actually a cycle. They view cycles differently from what the Sharia views. So it is all about the timing. It's all about the timing and not necessarily about what is happening internally. So this point I'd like to make clear. Some women have an intuition to say that, listen, I feel, I know it is haze, or I feel, I know it is istihaadhah. Sharia doesn't consider your feeling at this point in time. Sharia doesn't consider your feeling. It considers what you are seeing and when you are seeing it. What you are seeing and when you are seeing it. It's not about what you feel or what you think it is. So that is why the numbers that we speak about, the 3, 10, 40, etc., the valid habits, those things are very important because it is about what and when you see it, not about what you feel it is. So the doctor may tell you something, yes, from perhaps a medical standpoint, that may be the case. But from a Shari perspective, we have to consider these things. Otherwise, it means now that, okay, all the women perhaps that a part of this master class or the woman in the society need to go to a doctor to find out, you know what, is this haze or isn't this haze? Will this be counted? Wouldn't this be counted? So Shariat has set a general rule to make everyone's life easier and hasn't made it compulsory for anyone to now seek medical advice to see whether this actually counted as a cycle or not. So you will follow what you see and when you see it based on the rules of haze and nifas, etc. With regards to the habit, if a woman has her haze for 6 days, for 3 months in a row, and then in the fourth month it extends to 10 days, will she make ghusl according to the 8 day habit or after the 10 days? Okay, so look, habits are there to guide us and habits can change. So you will follow your habit strictly until it changes. So we said 3 days or more, 10 days or less, that is counted as a valid habit and the habit will change. So she has a standard habit of 6 days. In one of the months, it now perhaps changed to 8 days or it changed to 10 days. How did that happen? The blood, one, didn't stop after day 6 and stopped at day 10, or the blood stopped at day 6, but she had one more spotting on day 10. So when the blood flows continuously, she'll know, okay, I'm not going to make ghusl now because there's a continuous flow here. But when it stops, the rule at that point in time, remember the laws of Sharia apply to us at a specific point in time. So I need to ask myself, a woman needs to ask herself, what is applicable to me at that point in time? So day 6, the blood stopped. She knows this is a habit. What must she do? She'll make ghusl and continue as normal. So let's say this happened in Ramadan. She's not going to say, listen, I'm going to wait 4 more days to decide. She, at that point in time, she has to continue with her salah, compulsory. She has to continue with the fast, compulsory. Yes, on day 10 when this occurs, then she will look at it retrospectively. Like we explained before, it is not a definitive state at that point in time. It is a retrospective calculation. You have to, that's why it is compulsory to make a record. So day 10 comes, she spots, we say, okay, fine, the period between day 6 and day 10, that is accounted as a legal period of haze, and all of it will be counted as haze. And now her habit has changed from 6 to 10. If she performed salahs, etc., not counted. If she kept fast, etc., she has to make qaza of it later on. Now the question arises, was she sinful in doing that? No, of course she was not sinful, because she was not aware of the state at that point in time. Is it correct to say that a lady's habit is the number of days a woman bled in her last month, as long as it's more than 3 days and less than 10 days? It's not totally accurate, because it is possible. It is possible that a woman can experience 2 haze in a month, right? So for instance, she spotted 3 days at the start of the month, and then she was clean for 15 days. Then she spotted 3 days thereafter. So here you've got a situation where she experienced more than 1 haze in a month. So it's not totally accurate to say that. What is accurate to say is that she will follow her last habit, her last haze habit, or her last valid habit. Okay. Now we look at universal principles and maxims of purity. We're coming into the discussion of purity. So we looked at haze, we looked at nifas, we look at Istihaadhah, but and now we look at tuhars and purity. Tuhars and purity that apply to haze and nifas. So the rule is haze and nifas cannot be successive, and a purity is required to separate them. So a woman cannot have a haze immediately after 1 haze. So let's say it was 10 days of haze. We can't say the second day of haze from day 11 to day 20 is now counted as haze. There must be a gap. There must be a separator between 1 haze and the next. And the same would apply to nifas. So a complete tuhar, which is 15 days or more, 15 days or more must exist between 2 haze or between a nifas and a haze for both of them to be valid. So she had a spotting of 10 days. The blood that flows thereafter will fall into the tuhar period. The ruling of the blood in that tuhar period will be Istihaadhah. If a complete tuhar does not exist between any of them, the second blood will be counted as istihaadhah. So any bloods that occur in that tuhar period, in that separator period of 15 days, cannot be taken as hays, cannot be taken as nifas, etc. It will be istihaadhah. So the minimum period of purity is 15 days between two hays or between a nifas and hays. Let's look at one example. Day 1 to day 10, she spotted. Day 11 to day 25, in other words, 15 days, she was clean, no spotting there whatsoever. And then she spotted again from day 26 to day 30, the last 5 days of the month. Right? So now, question is, can a woman experience more than one haze in a month? So the answer is yes, like we explained before and like it is being seen on the chart, provided that there is a valid tuhar of at least 15 days between them. If it is less than this period, it will be istihaadhah, right? So there must be 15 days. If it is not 15 days clean, we cannot count it as a separator between the bloods. Any bloods in excess of that will be istihaadhah. The minimum period of purity is 6 months, 180 days between two nifas. So you've got 6 calendars here. That is equivalent to 180 days and more. So we say that this there has to be this period before experiencing another nifas. Like we discussed before, any bloods lesser than this will be istihaadhah. Now, of course, this is considering that there is no haze in between, right? There's no haze in between whatsoever, then this will apply. Otherwise, it's possible for a woman in this period to have other haze and other istihadahs that stem or come and follow after a haze. In regards to purity and tuhars, there is no maximum period of purity. So in other words, let's say a woman is 30 years of age and she had a spotting when she was 30. Thereafter, nothing at all for the next 3 years. Right? There is some level of differences, but generally speaking, there is no maximum period of purity. So we'll discuss as to the details of purity and how they affect a woman's cycle later on. But as a rule, there is no maximum period of purity. So we know the minimum is 15 days, right? That is the minimum, but there's no maximum. Question is, if you start bleeding before 15 days are up, will you start counting haze? Will you start counting haze from the 15th day or not? So as a general rule, there are exceptions to this rule, but as a general rule, it will only be possible for you to actually count after day 15. You can't count from day 14, for instance. So let's say a woman started spotting from day 14 onwards, right? And then she spotted 2 days after day 15, day 16, and day 17. You can't say, listen, it's actually 3 days if you count it from day 14, because that has fallen within the tuhar period and it falls under the ruling of istihaadhah. You can't actually count from that day. You will say, no, it's still 2 days. It's not a valid haze as yet. Is there a tuhar habit which you must follow, or is it set 15 days or more? Now, the next discussion goes into all the details and different types of tuhar and what you follow. That will come in the section after this. But to answer that question, yes, it must be 15 days in terms of number. It cannot be less than 15 days. This, obviously, we're talking about a mu'tada, a habitual woman. We're not talking about a beginner woman who experiences continuous flow for the first time, because her, we discussed, first 10 days haze, second 20 days tuhar, and the bloods in those days will be istihaadhah. Obviously, this is the case where she experiences it the first time and there's continuous flow of blood. That brings us to the end of today's lesson. Our next lesson will be on Tuesday, inshallah, and we will dive into tuhars and purities, which is very, very important, and it affects calculation in many cases. سبحان الله وبحمده سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.